Hi, and welcome back to the Therapy Pages podcast, where we review and discuss therapy and mental health books. And I am April.
I'm Dory.
And today we have Chelsea Harris with us as our guest. So, Chelsea, if you want to introduce yourself and say something about yourself.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Harris. I'm a therapist in private practice, and I'm just down the hall from April and Dory.
Yes, right, very close to us, which is nice. So we are very happy to have her here. I think it's always really fun when we have guests on, or anyone who will add a different perspective. So today we're going to talk about Brené Brown. Her book is called Atlas of the Heart. And I was just talking on a previous podcast that Brené Brown is my hero. And I know, Chelsea, you said that you really, really like her too. So this is really exciting to be able to talk about her book, and we can just kind of talk about her in general. So I know Brené calls herself an emotions researcher, which I think is really cool too, to be able to research emotions.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
she really focuses on like shame and grief and vulnerability.
Mm.
And she's my hero too. And I feel like I would just like give anything to just be like her assistant, just work for her. That's like my dream.
So Brené, reach out to us.
Yes, please.
Let's tag her somehow.
I wonder if we
We're
can.
we're fangirling you,
We're
Brené.
We are. We definitely are. So let's get into the book, Atlas of the Heart. So what did you guys think about it?
Mm.
I loved it. I actually it came out I think during the pandemic, either 2020 or 2021, and I read it and I like gave like all my close friends and family a copy. I was like that everyone needs to know to read this because I think it's just amazing how she just goes through all these different emotions, and it's really I feel like a guidebook, like what she says, like it's an atlas, a map
Mm.
for emotion. So
Chelsea, I did the same thing. I was telling April, I bought 5 copies and I gave them to, people who I thought would really appreciate them or people that needed them. And I gave it as my white elephant gift in Christmas, that we do a white elephant exchange at Christmas time with my family. So, yeah.
yeah, and I feel I went wrong by only buying myself a Kindle copy because I was rereading this to do this podcast. I'm like, I don't have a physical copy. Like, why? Like, I feel like I left myself out of that. So I feel like I'm gonna have to buy myself a physical copy now because I gave everyone else a physical copy.
Yeah. Well, it's also such a beautiful book.
It,
Like,
Oh,
I
it
it
mean,
is. I was
is.
going to
Like the
say that.
pages are just beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you definitely need a copy, because it is, yeah, it's such an easy to read book. And I really like how she wrote it, and she even has like a little comic in the back too, so you definitely need to buy the
Hmm.
copy.
As I'm looking at my book, I don't think I ever really read this, the mixed media representation of the heart on the front, and the words are, "We are the map makers and the travelers." Like, yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow, I
So,
didn't even notice that.
yeah, yeah. All right. So we all are big fangirls.
Yes, we won't even need to do a review at the end. We all know what we think now. But
I
so
know,
so
right?
what do you think were the things that stood out to you most? I know, Chelsea, you said just the idea of being able to write about so many emotions. I think there's like maybe like 86, 87 different emotions. I didn't count, but a lot.
I feel like there was even more than that.
Mm,
I forget the number that she had like said in her book, but like there's so many different emotions out there. Like,
Mm.
and there's just so many that like it's like we feel, but we don't really have a name for. So it was kind of nice being able to like look through and like see the name for them all.
Hmm. I agree. And how she organized the book, I think, was really helpful too. Like the places we go when, we're uncertain, or when things are uncertain or too much. Places we go when we compare. So like it really is like a map, like places that we go, like where do we go? And she talks about those emotions, which I think was a nice way to organize it.
And I think that like she really just builds like it's like also like a dictionary for like emotions. It's like we have a dictionary to understand like all these words and like what they mean, and we have color wheels to like for different shades and hues of colors. But like we never really had anything before for emotions, and I feel like she now made one. I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
been I feel like it's really insightful and just so much information that like she like captured, and it can help people have like, understand what we're feeling and verbalize exactly what we're feeling, and then
Mm.
offers a guide to cope with our emotions in healthy ways, you know?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Absolutely. And she also did, so when I think soon after she wrote this book, she did an HBO series on this book. And I don't know what if that's still on HBO or not, but what I really picked up the most from that was in I think the first episode, she said that when they asked people how many emotions can you name, that a huge
Mm.
majority of people were able to name three emotions. And that
Wow.
was just so mind blowing to me, to only be able to name three emotions. And she then goes on to say how limiting that language of emotions is so harmful to our mental health, and how being able just to name and identify an emotion really brings down the intensity of an emotion, whether it be anger or sadness. Just being able to say, I feel angry, I feel sad, will decrease that intensity.
Yeah, and I think when
Yeah.
we don't have that, like we're more likely to engage in like unhealthy behaviors and like project retroflexion, we can blame people, you know,
Mm.
it can cause so much like chaos by not knowing what we're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think I was listening to a podcast that she was on, and one of the things that she said when she was talking about different, they were talking about different emotions and what it means to like understand, like why do we understand emotions? And she was talking about empathy, and I said this earlier to April, but I think one of the way that she worded this, I don't know why it hit me, and yeah, I get this, but she said that when we ask people their story, well, instead of like assuming we know, like walking in their shoes, ask people their story for what it is like to be in their shoes and to believe them. I mean, like instead of, oh yeah, I can put myself in that person's place. Like I just think I don't know. Well, I know that's a little bit out of turn, but I wanted to throw that in there because it hit me because I heard it again. I'm like, oh wow, yes. Ask their story and what it's like in their shoes, not make assumptions based on my lived experience what it's like in their shoes.
We can never really know what it's like for somebody else. You know, we
Yeah.
only really know ourselves. Like we're the best, you know, we're the best knowledge for our own selves. Like we can't know what other people are thinking or feeling. I mean, we can have an idea like by like outward signs, but we can never truly know or experience that.
Yeah, and it just really like to me brought it just kind of like fine-tuned perspective for me. Like, yeah, it's like really bringing it in to emotions are so subjective. Like even we can say, this or like the sadness or the struggle or whatever, but it's so subjective because what's a struggle for me, might not be for somebody else. And that's why I think understanding life from their perspective, like what is your story and how did you experience it? You know?
I also
Yeah, that's so
really,
important.
really like how she really brings a lot of research into everything she does, and she does like interviews with other people and brings in what they say. Like it really struck me how, you know, she said that research shows that a third of U.S. adults will be affected by an anxiety disorder in their lifetime, but fewer than half of them would seek any professional treatment. And that's mind blowing that there's, you know, people are experiencing all this anxiety and could be diagnosed with anxiety, but yet they're not seeking help. And I feel like that, you know, having more awareness of emotions could help people, you know, maybe seek treatment.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Or even insight into, what am I experiencing instead of making assumptions about what it is or if it's good or
Mhm.
bad or, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, she does bring so much research to this book. I mean, and I think in her work in general, that's what she does, and that's so helpful in knowing that these things are researched, and it's not just like a book written. You know, comparing this to our first podcast that we did on bad therapy, you know, there was literally
Oh,
no research in that book. So I really, really appreciate that because I think it's so helpful. It feels very validating if you're someone who's experiencing all of these emotions. So.
yes.
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. This is the good therapy book.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Exactly.
Oh,
I
boy.
also like how she's so authentic and real, and she shares like examples about her own self and her own life. Like, so it's not
Hmm.
just like this person, oh, these are all these emotions, and this is how you can cope with them. She goes, I've also had to give up caffeine, commit to 8 to 9 hours of sleep, and exercise almost every day. It's just like she really like shares just intimate, vulnerable stories to like back, not just, you know, explain the emotions and what you can do. And she backs up the research and everything she's saying in the book by her own personal examples and her own vulnerability.
Hmm.
And I feel like she just really advocates for self-care. And I feel like I've learned that too. Like I've learned that there's a lot of things that I have to do for my own self-care, just to be the best person, best therapist I can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got a lot out of this book for myself, but also for myself as a person and for myself as a professional and things that I can offer to other people, whether it's clients or family or loved ones or whatever.
Yeah, I absolutely agreed. It's so helpful, I think, for all of those things. And as you were saying earlier, Chelsea too, I really like the way that she's so compassionate and giving ideas and suggesting, hey, maybe this is something that you're doing or you're experiencing, and this is how you change it without at all having any feelings of shame in that. She has such a
Mm.
focus on not feeling shame and not blaming, and just being so compassionate. And that's, I think, what I really like about her the most.
She's very compassionate, very
Yeah.
approachable, very, I mean, just, and that's why I love listening to her. Like, I just really like listening to her books because it's usually her narrating.
Yes.
And she just, with her little bit of Southern twang or, it just, I don't know, it's just comforting. And it's like, hot cocoa or something. Like, it's just so
Mhm.
comforting to listen to her.
It
Oh,
is,
it
and she's
really
so
is.
relatable.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, actually, I listened. Like, I was having like I was so the other year. I was like, I really want to finish this book, but I never have the time. But like, I'm driving all the time. I'm just gonna play it on my Bluetooth while I'm driving, and then I realized that she's narrating it herself.
Yep.
Like I love listening to her. Like like she's so comforting.
Yeah, I read this book when I think around when it came out or near. And I was at a training to get my certification for brain spotting. So it was a 5-day training. And by my Airbnb, there was a towpath and that I would go and walk every day after the train because the training to get certified is pretty intense. It's a full day of brain spotting, whether you're watching or you are, being the client or the therapist. Um, and so it was heavy. And I listened to this book, and I think April and I talked a little bit earlier today about books hitting you at different times in your life and how they hit you, and it just it's like exactly what I needed at that time, and it helped me process a lot of the emotions that one I witnessed in others, but also like during this intense um you know certification process, but also that I was experiencing, and it just was so yeah, I think it just kind of magnified the impact it had on me.
Yeah, and I think it probably had an impact on a lot of people. I think,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So as we are still fangirling over over Brene Brown. What was there for either of you? Do you think was there an emotion in the book that she explained and talked about that was kind of really eye opening for you, or maybe an emotion that you were like, wow, that kind of really hit me?
I'll say for me, one of the emotions that I um that I guess really hit me, and it was because of everything that was going on in my family at the time, was grief, and the way she framed grief and how people act, um either while in grief, as a reaction to grief, or so that was one, and I shared that with my family. I have the book now, and I was trying to find exactly where it is, but that was one that I
Mm.
recommended for people to read, like that specific part. Yeah.
Yeah,
So funny
that
you say that. That was my thought too, was on grief, but specifically she talks about disenfranchised grief. Um,
Yeah.
and I think I'm experiencing that now, and I think maybe a lot of us are. So disenfranchised grief, she says, is a less studied form of grief. So it's not openly acknowledged or publicly supported through mourning
Mm,
practices or rituals because the experience is not valued or counted by others as a loss. And that's
mm-hmm.
so interesting because a lot of times we experience grief that other people don't even know about, or a grief that someone else would say, well, like this person didn't die, why are you feeling grief over
Right.
that? And she went into talking about disenfranchised grief in her podcast, specifically on all of the changes that are going on in our world right now, and having grief over maybe like loss of a specific welfare program, or just maybe feeling loss of freedom of speech at times, or things like that. So even losses and the constant change that we are experiencing now, and that I think she was experiencing when she wrote this book in 20,
Mm,
that really got to me because I never really thought about that. And
mm,
being able to identify that as disenfranchised grief is so helpful.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
those chapters were like really hard for me to read and listen
Mm.
to. It was just, it felt so dark and heavy. I could only listen and read a little bit at a time. It
Yeah.
was, it gets really heavy with like those, like
Yes.
grief and like depression, like those
Despair.
that, but
Hmm.
yeah, despair. I was struck by, probably gonna botch the way to say this, even though I'm German, Schadenfreude.
Oh,
um,
yes. Yeah.
which is pleasure or joy derived from someone else's suffering or misfortune.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of like
Hmm.
people can bond over that, but that kind of bonding might feel good for a moment, but nothing that celebrates the humiliation or pain of another person builds a lasting connection. So I feel like I was
Mm.
really struck by that because I feel like a lot of that is going on in the world right now that,
Oh,
is such a lack of
yes.
empathy. And I think anything that shuts down empathy like needs to be avoided. The world needs more empathy, not less. And like I'm of the, if the other person isn't laughing too, it's not funny, it's not a joke mentality. And I don't like jokes that make fun of other people because there's harmful consequences. They're just
Hmm.
insults disguised as humor. And I feel like people should just be kind. And I just feel like the world really just needs more kindness right now. So
Yeah.
that was just really, it's kind of, it felt like that emotion just kind of really was really on point for the world today.
I agree.
Yeah.
And you said something with that, like with, whether with connection, right? So you can't really
Hmm.
form connection with that. And that's another big theme in her book. Like, emotions are a way to form connection, like, and how important connection is, you know, to relationships and to life. So, yeah.
Yeah. And emotions also just, they're messengers, so they can, they're a way of communicating and connections too. One thing that really struck me is that, there's a quote in here that people would do almost anything to not feel pain, including
Mm,
causing pain and abusing power. And I understood that there are few people who could handle being held accountable for causing hurt without rationalizing, blaming, or shutting down. And she said, what surprised me the most when I was growing up was how little other people seemed to understand or even think about the connection between feelings, thinking, and behavior. So it's just all these things just affect our relationships with other people. Um,
absolutely. And our ability to connect. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to that point, Chelsea, I think also understanding that no emotion is good, bad, right, wrong, but that they are just that, they're messengers, and I think that's
Yeah.
a big, I think that's a message in this book. Like, it's just because you're angry, it doesn't mean that's bad. Let's figure, let's explore this. Like, what is the anger telling you?
Yeah, yeah. It's not really about the anger. It's like it's what you do with that anger that can
Yes.
make it good or bad. And I think it can be really hard to be held accountable. Especially if I did something that like was like unintentionally caused harm. It's intentionally or unintentionally. And I think it's important to like stick to I caused harm and I won't do that thing again instead of I caused harm but I didn't mean to. Taking the I
Right.
didn't mean to out of it can really, it's really important because it takes you to like a grounded level and the authentic repair can happen. So I think it kind of also gives a guide on accountability and working through those relationship conflicts.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Where there's rupture, that you can have
Mhm.
repair. Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely.
A unicorn of a person once told me that conflict with other people isn't a bad thing. You can involve the appreciation of our different opinions and perspective. And when we're in the conflict, it can really suck, but the suck doesn't stay. And once we get
Mm.
through the conflict and through the other side, we can have a deeper appreciation of the other person and a deeper relationship too. So I feel
Yes.
like conflict isn't
Mhm.
always a bad thing. But it's just like
Yeah.
how you handle the conflict that makes it good or bad too.
Right. If you don't have
Agreed.
conflict, you're just avoiding, all of those
Yeah,
emotions. Yeah. Nothing good.
she
Good comes
talks
from it.
about the avoiding as well
Mm.
in her book.
Yeah, I was a big avoider for a long time of conflict.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
me
I think it's
too.
a very common thing. I feel like that's like
Yes.
our go-to. It's what we're taught to do, right?
Just everybody be happy. Let's just move on. Let's not look at this thing over here.
I was telling
Uh,
Dory earlier how much I feel so called out in reading reading this book in so many ways, and that's definitely one of them. That idea of avoiding conflict. Yeah. Mm.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but this is a good framework to use to be like, okay, yeah, conflict can be powerful, it can
Yes.
make relationships so much stronger if you
Mhm.
work through it.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is an emotion that you guys think that either your clients or our culture really has a hard time talking about? Is there any emotion that you think people really struggle with being able to identify and talk about, either maybe from shame or just not the
Mm,
knowledge of that emotion?
I think shame, grief, anger, I think can be a big one because I think a lot of clients, they feel anger is a bad thing when it's not always a bad thing.
Yes. Mhm.
hmm Yeah, I think shame is I agree. I think that's one that people don't want to acknowledge. Um, I also think jealousy. People
And
don't,
Oh
envy.
yeah.
yeah, and envy. People don't want to acknowledge that they have that, that they
And
feel
she
that.
actually explains a lot about the differences between jealousy and envy
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
in her book too, which is kind of mind blowing. It's like when someone's saying one of them, like that they're feeling one, they're probably actually feeling the other, just because they're so very close to each other and very similar.
Can you talk more about that? Why don't I remember that?
Yeah.
Yes, she did, and she also talked a lot about how feeling envy or jealousy brings about a lot of shame, and then there's so much
Hmm.
shame involved in that people don't really identify as feeling jealous or envy. So she says, so envy typically involves two people and occurs when one lacks something enjoyed by another.
Okay, okay. This is
Yeah.
Right.
And
ringing a bell now. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
envy occurs when we want something that another person has, and jealousy is when we fear losing a relationship or a valued part of a relationship that we already have.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay.
The reason for our jealousy and the accompanying emotion is that the other person or activity is threatening to take time away from our relationship. And I feel like that quote just kind of it hit me that, when we're feeling jealousy or envy or any emotion, it's not always just that one emotion. There's so many other emotions that could
Oh,
be involved. Like I could feel shame for feeling jealous or envy, or I could feel angry that another person is doing this, or I could be angry and jealous about something. There's so many emotions that a person could be feeling at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And isn't it interesting? Because I think, with, well, now I'm confused if it's envy or jealousy. But like with those emotions, it's like this perceived thing that these other people have. You don't even
Hmm.
know, right? So like I think a good example of this is how people look at social media and compare themselves to things. So maybe that she does talk about comparison also. So,
Oh yeah.
you may have envy or over someone's life the way that it's presented. Would that be where envy was, or would that be jealousy? Anyway,
That's a good
um,
question. Yeah, and important
but
to know.
yeah, but you don't know that that's just what they're showing. Do you know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
it's may just be a whole fallacy.
I
Yeah, and
think
that's what
social media is so dangerous. It's like
it,
Ugh,
it
smoke and
yeah.
mirrors.
It
yes.
does. So that's all of chapter 2, the places we go when we compare. So she
Oh,
says, and I love this, comparison says, be like everyone else, but better. Hmm.
a better, yes. And that's it,
Yeah.
right? That's like and that's what social media does. And like you
Yes.
just said, Chelsea, I mean, it's so true. Like we see these things and oh, look at how great their life is. Well, I want that. I can do that or whatever. And that it's, people are taking the most curated pictures or just sharing only the positive things. Like I know with parenting, hearing stories about these moms that make everything from scratch and they sew all their kids clothes or whatever, it's like wow, like and they have their house is perfect and they have 3 kids, 4 dogs, whatever. And it really, as a mom of, well, they're all adults now, but at the time, hearing these things, and social media wasn't as big, so it was other venues, but it's like wow, like I can't do that, and realizing comparing myself to others like that is just, it's not helpful for my life. That's not my life, and
Yeah,
I don't think that's really their life. But that doesn't matter. Even if it is really their life, it's not mine.
yeah,
So
Yeah, but
those are
that's
good points.
dangerous. Yeah,
Comparison is very dangerous. Yeah.
yeah,
it is. And I like her quote that comparison is actually not an emotion, but it drives all sorts of big feelings that can affect our relationships and our self-worth. And more often than not, social comparison falls outside of our awareness. We don't even know we're doing it. And this lack of
yes,
awareness can lead to us showing up in ways that are hurtful to ourselves and others. And I feel like that's just such a strong, powerful quote because comparison is very harmful. And I think it should be used with caution. It's like
yes.
a double-edged sword, I think.
Yeah, and that, not to bring up another thing, but in DBT, one of the one of the skills is comparison. I'm like, I don't like that. I never liked it. It never sat right with me. But I think it, when you look at it, it's okay, compare with yourself. Like don't compare to
Yes.
others. Because I just never, I love DBT and I like all of it except for that. I just, that one part of the accept skill I just did not like, because that was,
Yeah,
I don't know, it just never sat right with me until I framed it as just just compare yourself to yourself, like
yeah.
when you were coping better or worse or whatever, and what does that, how does that help you? But yeah, yeah,
I think we can really end up like really unhappy, or we can really hurt someone or ourselves when we compare ourselves with others. And I think that when we like use that as a way of reflecting though and setting goals for growth, we can motivate ourselves and to grow in a healthy way. Like I
yep,
like to ask clients, well, like look where you were a year ago, and look where you are
mm-hmm,
now. We can use it to motivate ourselves and, kind of just see how much you've grown, or you can see someone do something really cool and say, I want to learn to do that, instead of, oh, I wish I was like that. It's like, well, maybe I'll make the steps to go do that thing and try it out too. So I think it can be
yes,
motivating when used in like a healthy way, but it can be really harmful and worse, if used in a unhealthy way. And I think that's just the danger. It's figuring out when to best use it.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
I also found she said that our hardwiring makes us default to comparison. It seems to happen to us rather than be our choice. And I found that,
mm,
very like striking, But
Mm-hmm.
I think so much of our hardwiring and automatic thoughts can be a challenge, but those thoughts can be challenged. Like we could use CBT, DBT to challenge those thoughts. Um, and I think this is something that needs to be worked on every day and sometimes moment to moment, and just it's not just oh, I tried it once and I'm not going to do it
Yes.
again, because it has to be worked on again and again and again and tried again and again,
Yeah, like
so that way we can
mindfulness. I've
have
tried that.
awareness. Yeah. I tried it once and it didn't work for me, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
try it
so I'm
again.
done.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually like this book, like reading
Mhm.
it again and again, because every time I look at it, every time I listen, I get something else. Like something else strikes me. And maybe it's back to where I am in my life at this day or whatever is going on in the world at this time. But yeah, I mean, it just, repetition of things can be really helpful. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think just the spending time being aware of our automatic or negative thoughts or anxious thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and challenging, reframing them, fact checking, there are habits that like need commitment, and I think that, they can be tricky, like challenging them, but like they're little gremlins that pop up when you least expect them. But I think you have choices on how to act and what to do about them. It's just like in
Mm-hmm.
that one movie, you don't feed the gremlins after midnight, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Understand your vulnerabilities. Yes.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, so something else that really stuck out for me, and I was talking to Dory earlier about this too, was the idea that Brene has about near enemies and far enemies. I found that so interesting.
Yeah.
So she talks about a far enemy is the opposite emotion of what we're aiming for. So she says it's clearly different and easy to recognize. So an example would be hatred is the far enemy of compassion. So that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. We're usually pretty well aware what a far enemy is, but a near enemy is a state that looks similar on the surface, but actually undermines or blocks the real emotion or virtue underneath. So it can
Mm-hmm.
feel or appear like the healthy emotion, but it's rooted in disconnection. So that's really where she gets to talk about how to improve connections too. So, an example, she's saying pity can look like compassion, but pity actually will create distance, such as, oh, you poor thing. So, while compassion will create the closeness, saying like I'm in this with you.
It's kind
Mm-hmm.
So
of like how sympathy often gets confused for empathy, but they're so
yes.
different.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think it was really helpful for me in working with clients and trying to remind myself, okay, what is the near enemy to this emotion, and not getting sucked into that. So, like when Zori was talking about empathy and the courage to walk alongside, and how
Mm.
that's so important and so much different than like, oh, I can understand what you're going through, but right, we really don't, because we don't know that person's perception of that. So, the near enemy of the courage to walk alongside is controlling the path.
Mm.
So that idea of control, is coming up again. The far enemy is walking away, right? So just kind of, giving up, those kinds of things. But controlling the path is the near enemy of the courage to walk alongside, and it's just so helpful for me to know. I think personally and in work situations. So.
It
Yeah.
reminds me of one of
Yeah.
the quotes that she has in her book. Um, Someone had said, "You were afraid of surrender because you don't want to lose control, but you never had control. All you had was anxiety."
Yes. Oh gosh. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And somewhere, I'm not sure where it is, but I think it's in the book, but she talks about worry and, talking about the near and far enemies. The near enemy of worry is control. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Sounds like control is kind of a near enemy for
Yeah.
maybe a few different
Yeah.
emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, because if
Sounds
we
like
try
you
to
are.
control things like that, that's a losing battle, like controlling rather than observing, noticing, understanding, getting curious about. I think control is, sort of elusive.
It is,
Yeah, and we don't
definitely.
have control over a lot of things. We may think we do, but there's
Right.
just so much out of our control. Maybe have control over ourselves. We can try to have control over our thoughts and our behaviors, but we can't control what other people do or say. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
out of our control, especially in this day and age.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many great takeaways from this, from the book in general. Obviously, to just have something, have a source to refer to if you're not even understanding how you're feeling, but also to explain emotions to other people. I just think this is such a needed and usable book that I think every person every person should own one, Brene. So I'm
This is like
pitching your
the
book.
emotion dictionary, so I feel like it
It
should be
really
sold at
is.
dictionaries.
Yeah, and one thing, it really encourages us to be curious, not making an assumption about what they meant. If it feels, uncomfortable, then you ask, you talk about it, like just being able to be open about emotions, about feelings, about things. I just think that this book has really given people, me included, like a health framework to talk about emotions, to how to really think about them.
Yeah, and that reminds me, in my self training, had one of the trainers said that we all really common thing, and it's people
Yes.
do it all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, because we're looking at life through our life view, not, and
Hmm.
that's why that sentence or that statement that she made hit me so much. Like, yes, like I hear your story, but what is your story like to you? Like
Hmm.
how do you live? Like, what is it like to be in your shoes? I don't want to make assumptions about what it's like. What is it like? And
Yeah.
not minimize and like, oh, well, it's not that bad, or, but no, okay, I hear you. I'm here with you. Yeah. And because so often we try to make people feel better, or I mean, I think particularly young therapists, or when people think of therapy, like, oh, they're going to make me feel better. Well, no, like that's not a therapist's job, and that's not really how it works. Hopefully going to therapy or reading therapy books or understanding emotions or whatever, you gain insight into yourself, and you figure out, like, okay, like maybe the therapist can teach you skills like DBT, CBT, somatic thing, what the gestalt experience is, the person, and it's them as within, and it's their perspective and how they start to look at their own emotions, their own lived experience, and you know kind of make
Yeah.
sense and do things
And
differently.
I like what you brought up. You may not always feel good after a therapy session. It could be a really hard therapy session, and you may
Mm-hmm.
feel like drained. You may feel, like you're still working through things. Therapy isn't always going to be like an instant fix. It's going to be like a progression over time.
Yeah.
So I think, and if there may be times where you leave feeling really good, and that's great. But I think even if you leave feeling not great, that's just insight into, well, maybe there's more to work on, or
Curiosity,
some
right?
curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have a client who recently said to me, I really don't like when I'm in a really great mood and I'm having a great day, and then I have to come to therapy and talk about these hard things. And kind of made me laugh. But I mean, that therapy is hard. It's very hard. And you're right, you're not going to always leave feeling maybe like you're feeling very happy or like, oh, everything is great because you're talking about hard things. But that's a
Right.
way
Hmm.
of not avoiding your emotions is to talk about the hard things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's also when, as a therapist, and maybe you guys have done this too, but the client may come in and say, okay, today is just like a talk day, or today is
Yeah.
I don't want to do heavy stuff. Like I'm not going to do brain spotting. I'm not going to do, ART or anything. Like it's just, let's just like I just want to fill you in on what happened. Like
Yeah.
I don't
Yes.
want to go deep.
And it's really helpful when clients do say stuff like that because it's like I may get a sense that okay, they might not need to be pushed,
Yep.
but
Yep.
like if they don't say it, it's hard for me to really know until it's like something happens and then it's just like, okay, I will, pull back a bit. But it's really helpful when clients express how they're feeling about sessions, about what they need,
Hmm.
because I'm
Hmm.
Yes,
not a
great
mind
point.
reader. I can't know. I
Right.
can't know how it's
Right.
going for you unless you say something. I may get signals, but and I do like to check in about how things are going. I try to update my
Yeah.
treatment plans every 6 months and figure out what's helping, what's not helping.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the language that she gives, this is why I think this is a recommended for me, it's a recommend to pretty much everybody.
Hmm.
Um, but that's why, because it really helps. I mean, obviously, we talk about all of these things in therapy, or we try to, but by them having this resource, this, encyclopedia of emotions, it really helps them to be able to talk about where they are and what they may want to work on, or, they're feeling angry all the time. Oh, what's this about? Like, what am I really, because she talks, there's a whole section on what's behind the anger. Anger is
Hmm.
this defensive emotion. And, so I think giving them this, or them having this resource, really helps for people to come in and be more informed and be able to, direct their therapy a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you're able to use that language of identifying the emotion, how are you feeling? Just that simple, start,
Mm.
it helps so much. And
Yeah.
sometimes in therapy sessions, that's where we have to start. If you have someone coming in who isn't even able to identify their emotions, that's where we start. It's like, okay, let's do check-ins. How are you feeling throughout the day? Name
Hmm.
one emotion, and learning about different emotions.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, like I'll have a client say, like, I'm feeling really emotional, and I'm like, well, what specific emotion? They're always like, wait, what? Like, like they're like confused about that, but then they get it. It's like, oh, I feel sad, I feel grief, I
Yep.
feel angry, upset, and they're able to then kind of expand on that more.
Hmm.
But one quote that I felt like really stuck out was, now when I start to feel resentful, instead of thinking, what is that person doing wrong or what should they be doing, I think, what do I need, but I'm afraid to ask for. I think that was just really
Oh, yeah.
powerful because it's like so many times we're just not asking for what we need and it can build resentment. And I think, it's really important to put careful awareness to what arises in us and what we need. It's probably my Gestalt training coming out, but, where it's a focus on like the awareness and contact cycle and all that. But there's been so many times in my own past that I've denied needs or put off needs, and that just put me in like unhealthy states. And I think that it makes it harder to watch out for resentment and the hard emotions when we do that. And, the more that we take care of our needs and ask others for what we need, we can possibly prevent things like resentment or acting on our emotions in unhealthy ways. So I think, just more awareness and mindfulness is just really a really helpful tool.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
Absolutely.
Chelsea, you made me remember now that her description of resentment was to me, I was just like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Like one of those
Yeah.
moments. So she talked a lot about resentment, and saying, right, she was saying like someone was like resting, and having like resentment toward that person for resting, and then realized, I'm not mad because you're resting, I'm mad because I'm so tired and I want to rest.
Mm,
But unlike you, I'm going to pretend that I don't need to. And that just really hit me, that idea of
Yeah.
resentment. Yeah.
It shows it's the
yeah.
feeling of frustration, judgment, anger, better than, and or hidden envy related to perceived unfairness or injustice.
Mm,
It's an emotion that
mm.
we often experience when we fail to set boundaries or ask for what we need, or when expectations let us down because they were based on things we can't control, like what other people think, what they feel, or how they're going to react.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
I feel like
Wow.
that's just
Yeah.
a powerful,
Absolutely.
powerful.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I could talk about every emotion in this book for hours. Do we have
I
all day?
I
know.
know, right? Right.
It's also
Yeah. So what's
interesting.
what's a takeaway? I mean, I guess I don't know how long we've been talking, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. What I'm thinking, as I'm, thinking of all the emotions too and things that are coming up for me, especially I think right now in this time of my life and this environment, I've really, really enjoyed her talking about love and how
Mm,
love can bring people together and can
hmm
Yeah.
bring compassion when we learn to love those people who maybe don't even have the same beliefs as we do, or we feel like we're constantly arguing, about different beliefs. Is how do you come to a place of having love and compassion and just making the world more compassionate in general. So that was just a huge takeaway for me personally. So a quote, she said, love is not something we give or get. It is something we must nurture and grow. A
mm,
connection that can be cultivated between two people only when it exists within each one of them. And we can love others
mm.
only as much as we love ourselves. So I think that
Mm.
was so important, just that idea of compassion. So that, and then just the idea of being able to identify emotions more were probably the two biggest things that stuck out for me.
I agree. Yeah. How about you, Chelsea?
I feel like, not just, about the emotions and, learning about the different ones. It's also a good guide on how to properly take care of ourselves and what we need,
Mm,
asking for what we need and not engaging in like the unhealthy behaviors, like the projecting, the blaming, the shutting down, the blaming, and finding ways that I can cope, and I've been, I really the past couple of years, I've been really focusing on, improving my self-care. I did, 100-mile hiking challenge last winter, and I've been, I've learned that like I have to be in nature, and hiking and camping are like huge things for me. But then I've also learned that I love swimming. I It's something
mm,
that like I've been like I grew up in the water, and as an adult I don't get that chance. So like I have been lap swimming now for the past few months, and I feel like it's been really good for me. So I feel like just making sure that I have time for these things that fill me, like the
Mm.
hiking and the gym time, the lap swimming, reading, and just taking time for myself and resting and not overloading my schedule and not isolating and just kind of balancing everything. So I feel like, it's kind of like that added layer of yes, we feel all these things, but we need to have all these other, healthy, practices to support ourselves in dealing with these hard things. So I feel like it was just a good reminder of, of self-care, and a good
yeah.
validation almost. That yes, I'm doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with all of those. I think a big takeaway for me is, obviously having the language, right? So getting emotional or seeking or understanding, um, emotional intelligence. And I think curiosity, being curious about things, I think is key. I mean, one of her things that we know is her study of vulnerability. And I think she, in talking about vulnerability and that it's okay, it's not a weakness. It's okay to, kind of look at vulnerability more as um, again, like what is this telling me? And I think that was a takeaway for me, like accepting any emotion without judgment and just exploring and understanding what they're telling us instead of our preconceived ideas of what they may or may not be. So,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
encouraging, I think, just having the language, I think is really important, the emotional vocabulary.
Yeah, agreed. So what would you what would you guys rate the bug? We usually, Chelsea, we usually do a 10 out of 10 scale. So,
Yeah.
Oh, like rate it, like 10 being the best ever.
yes,
Yeah.
10 being the
Oh, like a 15, 20.
And would you recommend it to everybody, or are there populations you think you would not?
I'd say everybody. I feel like children maybe like they might need help with it. So I feel like it might be good for children, but I think having like a parent or adult kind of making it more age appropriate. I think
Yeah.
like
She
taking
should
things
have a
out of the
kids
book.
version.
She should.
she
That should be her
should,
next
yeah.
book. She actually just came out with a new book too, and it's strong, stronger ground. And
Yeah, I
so far
think
that's been
Strong
pretty
Ground, right?
good
Yeah.
too.
Hmm.
Yeah, we
Huh.
both ordered it, but we both bought it and I have it, but I haven't read it yet. So,
I started one, I'm the first chapter of it still, but
okay.
it's pretty good.
Oh, maybe we could do a podcast on that one too.
Yeah. Yeah. We could do Brené Brown for the next year.
I would be happy with that.
Um, yeah, so I give it, yeah, I recommend it to all of my adult clients, and I recommend that my teen clients listen to it, and I think it's like mandatory reading for every therapist.
Oh my gosh, yeah, agreed. Yeah.
uh, and so yeah, I mean, I give it the highest possible score for sure.
By highest possible. I feel like I keep rating books higher than 10 too, but
I know.
100 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But
Yeah.
yeah, agreed. I definitely would recommend it to anyone. And even, I mean, yeah, obviously, kids can't read it, but I mean, I think if I would have learned emotion names in, grade school, gosh, that would have been amazing. So, teaching kids how to be able to name and identify emotions, yeah, definitely would be great to have a kid's version of Atlas of the Heart. But yeah,
Oh
I just
yeah.
love this book. I've read it so many times and I will continue to recommend it to anyone.
Yep. Me too.
Well, thank you
Oh,
so much for
awesome.
joining us, Chelsea. You are more than welcome anytime.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, Brene Brown, if you're listening to this, I would totally work for you.
Come on our podcast.
Oh,
Yeah.
that'd be awesome.
So, well, and thank you everyone for listening. If you have, again, if you have any ideas of therapy books that you want us to read, just send us a message. We are trying to come up with ideas actually for our next podcast on what a book to read because we haven't decided yet. So, if you have any
Yeah. We have
ideas,
a
let
few
us
floating around, but always open
know.
to, you know, to suggestions.
Yes.
And stay tuned to the podcast. It's ever changing. We're going to be adding some, some different features. So maybe some music, maybe some other things.
Yeah, who knows? It is ever changing. It's all a learning experience. So,
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
so well, keep reading, and we will see you guys soon.
Yep.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Hi.